We're speaking this morning to Shireen Zainudin and Viji Krishnamoorthy, who are collaborators on the Lockdown Chronicle. Thank you so much, Chronicles.
Yep.
We're speaking this morning to Shireen Zainudin and Viji Krishnamoorthy, who are collaborators on the Lockdown Chronicles. Thank you so much, ladies, for speaking to us this morning on the LITE Breakfast. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all. How did you become friends? And have you actually worked together before on any other projects?
How did Viji and I become friends? We actually don't remember. I woke up one day and there she was, my friend. No, I think I came back to live in Malaysia, I think about 18 years ago. Yeah, something like that. And I don't know how, but somewhere along the way, quite early on, Viji and I became friends. I think we had a lot of mutual friends. Our kids went to the same school. We had similar interests. And just somewhere along the way, we met and clicked and became really good friends.
Now, you were both inspired to put together an anthology. Of stories about being in lockdown. I'm sure we all have our own stories of being in lockdown, right? First of all, how was the MCO for the both of you?
I think it was a little bit daunting to start with, all that time at home with just your immediate family. And I think an experience like this really tells you whether you love and get on with those closest to you. But in time, I think what was really telling for me was the quiet, the stillness, the ability to be at home and to find things that filled your waking hours, so to speak. And a lot of that came from, I think, books. It came from rather more meaningful conversations you had with people who you weren't able to physically reach out and see. And I think it really kind of shows you at the end of the day, what's really important are the people, not the things, and how eggs and rice is all you really need to get by.
But what were your own lockdown experiences like though?
It was actually pretty traumatic in the beginning. Right at the beginning when it happened, I'm going to be really honest. I think I spent the first 2 weeks crying. It was that bad because I was, it was only my daughter and I at home, so I felt really, really isolated. I think we both did because my son was stuck abroad and couldn't come back, and I think this sort of thing was what I felt difficult. My other half was also actually in Sarawak and couldn't come back either. Couldn't join us in KL either. So that for me was very difficult. And I think about 2 days after lockdown happened, hard lockdown, March 18th, I slipped on the staircase and I fractured my foot. So I felt isolated and unable to walk. So a lot of things happened that made me realize, that made me feel helpless, and then stuck at home. But a funny thing happened. Within about not even 2 weeks, I kind of hit my wobbly stride, not being able to walk, and then found good things about this, found good things about the isolation, realized how little one needed to be happy, realized how lucky we were to have technology and be able to speak to people we love every day, be so grateful for that silence, like Viji said, to be able to connect with people in a real way. We are distracted by a million things. And I think, leading on to a question I think you might ask, which everybody asks, is that's where the journey of the book began, when I realized that this whole period was a journey for me and that it would be a journey for other people. And that when I spoke to friends and loved ones and people like that, everyone was going through what I was going through, as in lockdown, isolation on their own, but everyone's story was different. Everyone was going through something, fairly profound, but unique. Yeah. and that's what it was for me. Yeah, that I went through a real kind of journey as time progressed.
Yeah, everyone do have different stories, 1,001 stories to tell, going through MCO, the whole pandemic itself. But tell us about the anthology itself. How did this book come about? Was it Shireen's idea, Viji's idea?
Shireen?
It was probably mine. Yes,
it is her idea.
But because of what I just said, because it had been such a strange journey for me, and because I discovered so much about myself and everything. I just thought, and then when I was talking to people, I realized everyone had a different story. So when we were finally able to meet, and we say this in the Forward Tell book, when we were finally able to meet, Viji was one of the first people I met up with when we were finally able to meet. We had coffee somewhere. Other than my family, she was probably one of the first people I met. And I had been thinking about it, like, these stories are so good, we need to collect them. So when I met Viji, I actually said, Viji, we need that we discussed everyone's stories, everyone's, what we'd heard, this, that, the other. And I said, these are really valuable stories. We really need to collect these stories in some kind of anthology, and make a book out of them. And I said, I had woken up that morning, realized I was going to go see Viji, and I thought, that's it. This is meant to be. She's the person I have to do this book with. So I knew there were stories. I knew I wanted to collect them. And I knew I wanted to do this with Viji. And she was slightly stunned at first. And then
Correct.
like, yeah, you take
Really?
it.
I was like, are you sure? Really? I was just looking for a wonderful, wonderful catch up with someone other than my family in the flesh. And I wasn't expecting her to say, okay, listen, this is what we're going to do. And I was like, really? No, I don't think so. I've got this and that and the other. And she said, no, it's kind of non-negotiable. We're going to sit down and we're going to do this. And I think once I let that initial, the initial, I wouldn't say fear, but the initial, what would I say? Disappear. It's sort of like, I thought, that is a good idea. That sounds like a very, it would be a wonderful project to do. And once we got started, we kind of hit the ground running.
Since MCO started, many Malaysians, we all have 1,000,001 stories to tell, right? But what made you decide on these 19 stories? Was it because they were relatable, or like they were funny? How sad these stories were, maybe?
Okay, maybe I'll start here. We wanted 19 because of COVID-19, right? So that was the premise. So that was where we started and said, okay, that was going to be the baseline. So we thought hard about, we wanted to have very different voices, diverse stories. I mean, as Shireen said earlier, everyone had been through this. Everyone had their own version of the lockdown. And we wanted to have it as fiction because we wanted to have whatever their experiences were in real life, or what they had seen, or what they'd heard from friends. So all of that kind of percolated through these 19 fiction stories. Shireen?
Yeah. I think fiction, I personally I was reading a lot and talking a lot to people, and I'd seen a lot of, even casually on Facebook or whatever, personal narratives, people talking about what they've been through. And I thought, we're all going to have seen this and read this, everyone's personal stories. And I thought fiction just gives you that layer of freedom to use your experiences, but you are able to create a different story out of it. It's still based on your experiences, but there's just that filter of being able to do a little bit more with it. And I thought it would be interesting to see how creative people got about writing short stories under a lockdown period. So I thought fiction would be a great
platform.
Great platform. And I thought I'd like to read this. I often think whenever I'm doing anything or creating anything, would I like to read this, buy this? And I thought, yes, I would like to read a book of 19 stories by sort of Malaysian voices, describing their experiences during these times. And so for me, that was why. And like Viji said, we all knew or had heard of different people who were doing different things. And so most of the people we knew, some of the people we reached out through friends because we thought they'd have an interesting perspective. Or they had a valuable voice, or they were doing something important in society, in the community, and we want them to write. So we approached more than 19 people, and 19 stories got into the book.
Now, we understand that these stories are fictionally retold, but based on real experiences. Can you share some of the plot lines and premises of these stories?
We've got such a range. We've got the voice of a river. So what the river went through in lockdown. We've got the voice of a 9-year-old child who comes face to face with death. We've got a story of oh, I'm trying to think now. Of a marginalized woman who basically, it's her fall in this time of lockdown, and how, that she does find humanity out there. We've got a wonderful story about a poet whose poems are being stolen, and so it's such a range. It's such a range of stories and voices. It's quite incredible, because I don't think there are any two stories that are repetitive, in terms of theme.
Yeah, I think the voices sort of we were quite deliberate, but it also happened quite organically. That the stories come from all around Malaysia. We also have non-Malaysians who reside in Malaysia who have written. We have stories about and written by refugees. We have stories written that take place in outer space. We have insane stories. We have sad stories. We have stories that are that are based in Bangsa, about your middle class Bangsa family, what they went through. We have stories based in the East Coast, fishing village or a farmer's family.
It's a range.
And it being Malaysian, we have stories about spirits, we have stories about food, and we have stories that will always have politics in it. So it's very Malaysian, and we hope it resonates with Malaysian readers and even readers abroad, because I think everyone has their version of it. But yes, it's a little bit of everything.
Now, we also understand that you each contributed one story to the anthology as well. Tell us about your personal stories.
My story, I'm the one who writes as a 9-year-old girl. So my voice, my perspective is that of a child during the lockdown, and what she goes through. And what she goes through is that she experiences death for the first time during this lockdown period, and it's this story. It's her story about meeting death, what death means to her during lockdown.
Sounds pretty. Well, it sounds pretty dark. A 9-year-old meeting death, but hey, if it's
well, I tell you why I also wrote it, because I think death is scary for children, and I had been thinking before the lockdown of writing books for children that dealt with issues that scare them and try to not scare them. So I thought it just came together. I thought, we'll write about death so that a child can see that it's a strange thing that they're not really sure about, but it's not that scary. It is painful, but it doesn't have to be that scary.
So my story is completely different. So mine is about a marginalized Indian woman who's got kids with her, and how her absolute descent. It's an unfortunate descent in this very hard time when people have lost jobs and lost their livelihoods, and how she then migrates across town from a very Indian-centric town. She migrates to somewhere in Pudu, and how that entire move, she actually finds humanity does come through. There are some people who disappoint you, but there are people who really make you feel that there's hope. So mine is a little bit more about that, and it's called Migrating to Community, and it's where they come in and you see the good. You kind of see the good.
Actually, you know what? Did you notice some recurring themes or some common threads in all these stories?
No, not in all stories, but food is mentioned in a lot of people's stories. Yeah. That pops up because we talk about food all the time, and politics. I think in Malaysia we were going through some kind of political upheaval at the time, so it's not our focus at all, but in the telling of stories it definitely is something that comes up. I think that's a recurring theme. I think isolation, obviously, deprivation, connection. That runs through probably all the stories.
I think that really comes across the lack of physical touch, that whole lack of just the need to be hugged, and you want to hold someone's hand, or just to touch. I think that's something that I think everyone would probably relate to.
What was your experience like working on this? Would you collaborate on something similar again in the future?
We definitely will collaborate again. And I mean, it was such an organic working relationship. It was really lovely. I mean, I've said this to many friends as well, that we never bickered and argued. I think there was a mutual respect for each other, for our perspective, for our 2 cents worth. And we always came to the table with, completely whatever your opinions and what you think. We discussed it, and it was very, very, very. It was an enjoyable experience.
Quite early on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite early on. I mean, I kind of like, I think that is my energy anyway. I'm always like, and then Viji's very different in that she's very calm, she's very measured, she's very thoughtful, and she's like, But when she gets into it, which she did very quickly, she's just as passionate and driven. So yes.
We'd do it again.
We'd do it again in a heartbeat. In fact, we already know that we're going to collaborate on another book after this.
Now, what we would love to know is, when will this Lockdown Chronicles be published?
Also, how will we be able to get our hands on a copy, man?
It is already published. It's already out. It is at the moment sold by all Book Success stores nationwide and online, so which means it's available internationally. So we've had orders from Canada, Australia, the UAE already. So yes, but Book Success is our main retailer. So they for the moment it's with Book Success, but from January it will be in
other bookshops.
Most major bookshops. Yeah.
Now that we're out of the MCO, I mean, not really out of the CMCO yet, but how does it feel looking back at these stories and reading them again?
Well, I think it's quite incredible, because we all tend to have kind of short memories, and you forget the little the nuances or silly things that came through. I'm going to actually say it like the Doraemon voice: speak to your husband in a Doraemon voice. But one of our stories actually has that, and when it came in, Shireen, we just burst out laughing, because we thought, oh my God, we've actually forgotten that bit, So when you look back, it has cemented so many things about this period, which we will forget. We will forget what it was like to be quiet. We will forget what it was like to hear the birds first thing in the morning. There's so many things about that lockdown we will forget. Once the white noise starts coming, which it has already, the traffic on the road, all of that. And it's wonderful to have something, this little blue and lime reminder right here, to tell you, just to tell you, we did go through this. We did feel this. Someone did have that experience. And it's something that you look back and think, it's a wonderful little thing to remind you about a time we hope we'll never see again.
I think it's just, I mean, it's such an overused word, but it was just, it has been such an unprecedented time globally, all over the world, for everyone, that the whole world went through this. So I think we will look back on this time and read about or watch or whatever it is, so much will come from this year, from 2020. The way so much has come out of, reading about or writing about or making movies about the Second World War, any period that has had a huge impact. I think we'll look back, and this will be that to us. It will be a period that was just, shocking in some ways, but we all got something out of it, came together. There were terrible experiences. There were good lessons to be learned. And I think I'll always look back on 2020 as people go, awful, I just want the year to be over with. And yes, to a large extent, I feel that way too. But I also will look back at it and realize that that I learned so much from this. And I think a lot of people will have, that there were lessons to be learned that needed to be learned, and we did learn. So I think I will always be, I will always want to read about stories from this period. I will always want to hear stories from this period. I will want to watch movies from this period. I think it's been a really special time.